Greetings from Paranormal M, the channel that delves deep into the most perplexing and unsettling stories. Remember to hit that subscribe button and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest bone-chilling tales. We hope you have a hauntingly good time listening. I'm convinced my house was haunted when I was younger. When I was younger, around 12, my dad moved into a house. Now, this house always gave me weird vibes. I constantly felt like I was being watched. I couldn't sleep with my door open or without the TV on. Now, this is going to be two separate stories put into one. The first experience I had was around 2 a.m. I was in the living room watching TV and it was the weekend, so I was living it up, not having a bedtime. Now, the layout of the house was slightly weird, and the living room was dead center in the house, surrounded by dark hallways and rooms. I started hearing noises in the kitchen, but thought nothing of it because we had dogs. A couple minutes go by and I can faintly hear my parents in their bedroom doing stuff. Gross, I know. They were being loud, so I went to turn to look in the direction of their room. I was sitting with my back to the hallway, and as I'm turning, clear as day, I hear a child's voice in my ear say, "Don't turn around." I froze in place, absolutely paralyzed with fear, and then I just felt a tug on my hair. I promptly jumped up and turned on every light in my house as fast as I could. I didn't hear anything for the rest of the night, but needless to say, I didn't go to sleep until the sun was up. Fast forward a couple months later, it's Christmas Eve. Me and my sibling were sent to bed to prepare for Santa to drop off presents. It was around midnight and I was laying in bed watching TV and I was too excited about presents to sleep. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked over at my closet door. As I looked over, I saw a bright blue mist figure float through my door. It was glowing, but not enough to light up my room. I watched as it floated from my door and through my closet door, which was closed. I once again just was absolutely shocked. I covered up my head with the blanket for a couple of minutes until I felt better. I then laid on my side to face the other side of the bed. The blanket took the shape of someone lying next to me. I laid there and watched as the blanket moved as if something was breathing. This went on for a couple of minutes and then suddenly the blanket laid flat on the bed again. This all happened 12 years ago, and at the time I told myself that I was just imagining things. However, the older I get, the more I'm convinced that something was up with that house. When I talked to my dad about it, he told me some stories that they had about hearing a little boy when no one was there. I've done research on the house and never found anything myself. However, as we moved out, we found handprints made in the concrete on the driveway. 2 sets of child's handprints with 1978 written underneath. Story number 2. I don't even know how to explain it. Me and a couple of my friends decided to go out and eat dinner together to celebrate the end of the term 1. I'm from Australia. My buddy wanted to use the bathroom, and I asked if I could come with, in case anything happened. I said sure, and we went outside of the restaurant to the bathroom. I waited outside while he went in to do his business. I was standing there waiting for what seemed like a while, so I decided to go inside of the bathroom to see what was the holdup. However, when I went in, the bathroom was completely empty. There was no one in sight. I went and I checked all the stalls and urinals. There's 1 stall and 3 urinals in that bathroom. There was no one to be seen. I thought that maybe he had somehow gone out without letting me know, so I decided to call him and ask him why he did that. He didn't even pick up. I began walking back to the restaurant, then I looked back and I saw him exiting the bathroom. I was so confused and asked him how he pulled it off. He was very confused about what I was even talking about and said I must have been tripping. We proceeded to have a long discussion. He insisted that he was peeing in the urinal and that I must have gone into the women's bathroom. I denied this and said I definitely went past the urinals and went into the men's bathroom. We went back to the restaurant, and my buddy told everybody I must have been doing drugs and about what just happened. There was no way he or I could have been in the women's bathroom. I could hear women chatting in there, and if either of us went in, we would have been found out and kicked out. There's no hiding spots in the bathroom. I literally have no clue what happened. I had a déjà vu moment, and it's not just my mind playing tricks on me. So I know people talk about déjà vu a lot, and people love to explain it away with science like, your brain is tricking you because, insert logical reason here. You just feel like this scenario's happened before, but it didn't actually happen yet. I do agree with this to an extent. All of my déjà vus initially occur in my dreams when I'm fully asleep and unconscious. When it happens again in reality, I always stop and I think about it, but I dismiss it, because it's most likely just my mind recreating a sense of familiarity. I always try to find simple, logical reasons for unexplained things, because not everything strange has to be paranormal. However, I had this one déjà vu moment where I can't explain. It's nothing spooky, just strange, but hear me out. I was 14 to 15 at the time, and I was visiting my sister's boyfriend's family in their vacation home. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping at the time because it was just really hot, humid, and I was uncomfortable as hell. I would only get like 3 hours of sleep at night, and I'd never go into a deep sleep. One morning I wake up, but I don't fully wake up. My eyes were half open and I was just staring at the wall in front of me. But it felt like I was in a trance. My brain wasn't registering that I was conscious. I was in a state between being asleep and awake. I can't explain it well, but that's the first and last time that that's happened to me. I imagine this is what the beginning of lucid dreaming feels like, if I had the ability to lucid dream. So I'm staring at the wall, and a picture of a little girl pops in just right in front of me, floating on the blank space of the wall. I've never seen this little girl before in my life. She's white, has blonde hair, is wearing a black and red uniform, a black blazer and button-up top, red skirt on bottom, and has a star hairpin in her hair. She has a super distinct red birthmark on the left side of her face. In my dream, I'm confused because I've never seen this girl before and I'm wondering who she is. After I fully wake up and I actively think about what I had just dreamed about, I remember everything and I write it down, what she looks like on the notepad in my phone, jotting down everything I mentioned in this post in case I would forget. The whole day I'm thinking about her. Later that night, my sister's boyfriend's daughter, who is the same age as me, they're showing me her school yearbook. She flips through several pages and I see that little girl's picture. That same exact picture I saw that morning in my dream. The red and black uniform is her school uniform, and she's in second grade. The hairpin and birthmark is all there. I'm super freaked out and I start to tell her about it. She's obviously very confused and skeptical, so I show her the notepad on my phone and she's like, "How do you know her?" I said, "I don't know, it's just that I saw her in my dream." So understandably, she's creeped out. Doesn't believe me, and I'm pretty sure she thinks I'm kind of a weirdo. Ouija board. My family is different. We were raised Christian, but a lot of the family did witchcraft. Not your typical witchcraft. Most of us either kind of followed into it or just put that aside. I believe in things that most don't, but I don't practice anything. My brother, on the other hand, went into it hard body, and with that being said, here's the story. So I must have been like 23 or 24. I was living with my brother and my grandma. My brother at the time would leave the house and not come back for days. He had a massive DVD collection, and when I was bored, I would either, pick his door if the key wasn't available, and I would just go in there. And on this day, the key was there, though. So I go in, I grab a bunch of DVDs and lock the door because I didn't want him knowing I was in there. I watched like 2 movies, smoked some, got some bit paranoid from that, so I go to place the movie back into his room. I closed the door, locked it, and when I locked the door, I heard a sound that was like, what the fuck? So I unlocked the door and the door slammed into the closet doors. The way his room was is the door opens to the left, and on the right of the door was his double-door closet. So if the closet doors are open, he can't get out of the room. Being blazed, I thought maybe something fell in the closet, so I pushed one closet door closed and made my way in. I look around and realized that there was nothing. I was like, well, whatever. Close the closet, exit the room, lock the door, heard the same noise. Thinking I'm just being paranoid, I unlocked the door and once again the closet doors were open. I push one door closed and make my way in. Look around, only this time I felt the coldest shiver ever in my life. I was like, what the fuck, I'm out. Exit the room, lock the door, and that's when I hear the closet door slam against the room door. Not gonna lie, it made me jump, and I immediately run to my grandma and ask if she was there. She says no, and I'm like, you sure? She's like, yup. So now I'm like, this motherfucker's playing with my emotions. I unlock the door, close the closet door, and go in. I'm like, bruh, stop playing with me. I know you're in here. Nothing. Start looking around, though. I look underneath the bed, and I'm not so scared. Maybe he'll jump out and yell, ha, motherfucker. But there was nothing. I look behind the bed. Ha, motherfucker. Nothing. Behind the curtains. Nothing. I'm like, well, this motherfucker is in the closet. I open the closet door. Ha, motherfucker. Nothing. I move the clothes around and nothing too. I'm now convinced that I'm just lit and it's my imagination, so I repeat the process. This time I didn't lock the door. I run to my grandma, make her get out of bed, and take her to his room. I tell her to listen. I lock the door and the closet door flies open, slamming against the room door. She's like, what was that? I tell her, and I explained what was happening. She's like, well, he's in there. I push the closet door closed, take her in, show her the room. She's like, something must have put pressure on the door. We exit the room. I lock it and it happens again. I'm like, see? She turns, slaps me in the face and says, keep that kind of shit to yourself, and walks away. I push the closet closed, go in. I'm like, whatever you are, you're not welcome here. I exit the room, lock the door. This time I hear one closet door open. Curious, I open the door. The closet door furthest from the door was open again. I close it, and that's when his lights turn off. Mind you, this whole time the lights were on. That scared the bejesus out of me. I turn them on, exit, lock the door, hear it again. My dumb lit ass goes to look. Closet doors are open, lights off. I push in, close the closet doors, and look in. The room was a lot darker, almost like you couldn't see anything, even with the light coming from the hall. I turn on the light and run out, scared shitless. I leave the door unlocked. Around 11 p.m., my brother comes home. I rush to him and I'm like, you want to see something creepy? He looks at me with this pale face and says, no. I'm like, well, you're gonna anyway. So I take him to his room and he's like, why is the key in the lock? I come clean and I tell him the truth. I tell him, lock the door. He looks at me and says, I don't want to. I squint my eyes, now knowing that he knows something. He makes a big fuss but locks the door. We both hear that shit, and he starts spilling the beans. He's like some voodoo guy he knows gave him an original Ouija board. He's like, since he got it, he was having nightmares and hearing things. So he left the house for days. I'm like, so you leave it here and don't say shit? He's like, I thought it was in my head. He takes it, and I thought that he left with it. Instead, this motherfucker puts it in another closet that has a skeleton key lock. Doesn't say shit. Leaves the house for another 5 days. He comes home, spends like 3 days in the house. And for those 3 days, everyone is hearing a doorknob jiggling, but we don't know where it's coming from. I ask him, yo, you get rid of that shit? He turns super slow and says with this stupid look, no, I put it in the small closet. When he says that, we hear the doorknob jiggle harder. So we go to the closet, and you can see the doorknob moving. The thing with that closet is that there's no inside doorknob. I'm like, go in there and get rid of it. This motherfucker's like, I'm scared. But what if it tries to eat me or take my soul? I'm like, well, that's your fate. It is what it is. He takes it back to the old voodoo guy. That's when the old voodoo guy tells him that he found that Ouija board in the Amityville house in the late 70s, early 80s. After that day, my brother stopped doing his weird stuff and started going to church. Till this day, every time I talk about it, I feel cold shivers and I get goosebumps. My haunted high school. I've moved around states, but I grew up in Hawaii mostly, so it's like home. I do believe in a lot of different parts of Hawaii are very haunted, and especially schools. My middle school would always feel like I'm being followed, or even feel something or someone watching me, and I'd never tell anyone or ask anyone if they felt the same. The girls' locker room for, phys ed is always, it's like there's something wrong, and no matter what, even if all the lights are on, it would feel dark still. Every time I'd walk in, I'd want to leave that area. Just something about the locker room was off for me. I'd also hear about the cafeteria being haunted, that sometimes pots and pans would move on their own, but no idea if that's true or not. I also heard somebody was buried underneath someone's classroom, but no idea if that was true or not either. My high school years became worse with the high school I went to. Even before I went to that high school, at one night I was with my mom out for a drive. I was 11 at least, and I saw the bell tower from afar. It was 10 p.m. I looked at the tower, and I was 100% sure I saw a little girl, 7 to 9, maybe around those ages. She was in a white dress with long black hair covering her face. It was so creepy. I thought, why is there a little girl at this time, especially at that tower? I thought maybe her parents were worried, but I brushed it off, even if it didn't seem right. So years later, when I started school there, I learned that the tower's off limits for some reason. And it's always been off limits for years, and that door leading to the tower is chained up. I did hear some stories about a young girl who hung herself at that tower. Another story, but she wanted to be alone and was reading a book and people reporting her missing. When the people finally found her, she was hung at the tower, her body lifeless. Another time I was at my media class, and my teacher would say that she'd have tons of paranormal experiences because she wouldn't have any other explanation for these happenings. She showed me a video of a little child's shoe print not going anywhere. And it happened when the auditorium was being fixed and the construction workers put cement in the front and let it dry all night. When the next day was there was a footprint of a child. Everyone was clueless why only a only a child's footprint of a shoe, but where it led. Another story my teacher would tell me about was a football coach that was walking to leave for the day, and all of a sudden he felt something was wrong. So he turns around to look, and there there was all of a sudden students were looking like zombies and walking extremely slow for some reason. He turns around again and no one was there, and he freaked out. He left and it was like 5 p.m., so from then on he doesn't stay past 5. He doesn't believe in ghosts or paranormal things, but that afternoon scared him to death. One time it was my classmate. My teacher and me, I was in the class early. So there was a random sound like something popped or broke. It was kind of sounding like an AC, and it's a couple feet off the ground and there's windows in that area, but no explanation of what happened or why it sounded like that. The AC didn't break or turn off. It was just odd. Also, the back door where the black room is for developing photos, it opens and closes randomly when no one's near it or in that room. One time, my teacher had to call the janitor to help her open the door because the door locked somehow. Another time, the bell rang for first lunch. We go to class, and the second lunch students start them. As I was walking to class while looking at something in my science book, I accidentally bump into somebody's shoulder. I looked and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I looked to see who it was that I bumped into, but there was no one. It was weird, but I brushed it off, and then that night, I slept, and I had a dream that I saw a 6-foot-tall white guy dressed in green military clothes. Formal. I'd say maybe from the 1960s era. And he explained that he doesn't understand why he's trapped in my school or what happened. He said he tried to talk to people for years, but apparently I was the only person to see him or feel him. So he was surprised when I bumped into his shoulder. He told me since I could see him, and he knew and felt that I was a good person, he said he'd always protect me no matter what, and no matter where I am. And when I woke up, I looked in the mirror and saw a heart-shaped bruise on my cheek. I never really told anyone what happened, just kept it to myself. My teacher said years and years ago the school was a military hospital. So there was a military with, well, I suppose there was a soldier with injuries and wounds, and a lot of them died, and her classroom is where the supposed morgue was located. Someone from the school had a project. They went late at night and went in the area where the cafeteria is. The video, you can see a big trash bin being dragged across the cafeteria from one side to the other. They couldn't really get in since the doors were locked and chained up to the cafeteria. My other classmate, she went to a football game. And after she was talking to her friends, she looks up at the girls' restroom, and she saw the shadow of a lady. The windows opened and closed, the window on its own. Then lights turned off and on. Freaked her out she didn't see anyone physically in the restroom. At least that she saw, and the other class's windows, nothing, was all closed and the lights were off. But that restroom freaked her out. She told her friends that she had to go and left. Another thing that happened to me is I was filming the talent show with my media group, and I felt something or someone grabbing my butt. It was from behind a curtain. I said, "Really, stop it." And I look and no one was near me, and so I kept filming. It happened again. I was getting upset and I said, "Seriously, stop it." But no one was near me to do that, and the people standing farther away said it wasn't them. They didn't see anyone near me, so I don't know, just too odd and weird. I have more experiences with ghosts and spirits. If others want to share their stories and experiences with me, I'd be happy to hear. Story number 6. Werewolf in Texas, 2018. This story takes place in Texas in December of 2018. Weeks leading up to this incident, my mom didn't notice, I guess we'll call it a hand. The hand had a lot of fur and claws at the end of each finger. It looked like a mix between a human hand and a dog paw. My mom said it was clawing and scratching the window. She went back to sleep, didn't think too much of it. and there was a curtain at the window, so she didn't see anything else that night. A couple of nights later, I woke up randomly, and when I woke up, I noticed thick fur of something. I rubbed my eyes to make sure what I saw. I looked through the spaces of the curtain and saw a werewolf creature 6 or 7 feet tall. I remember it looked like the head of a husky, and that the fur was thick. The color of this werewolf was dark gray, brown, and red. The werewolf had pointy ears with some white on them, ice blue eyes. I was very intrigued by the werewolf. I didn't feel scared or threatened in any way. I felt the werewolf was curious. It had muscles all over its body, had abs, and it was on its hind legs. It stood up like a human. I did feel like I was hypnotized for some reason. I'm not sure if he saw me. I do say he because I felt it was a he, not a she. Hard to explain, though. I did feel the werewolf with ice blue eyes was coming back to see me again. I've never seen him, I never saw him again, but I felt like I knew those eyes, like I've seen them somewhere. I know, strange. Like a week later, I woke up to howls. In the area I live in, I don't usually hear coyotes or wolves. Then I checked my phone to see what time it was. 3:30 a.m. Thought it was an odd time to hear howls so deep. The howls were so deep the ground felt it, and I felt the shake. Then I heard something horrible. I heard a poor dog being torn apart by a giant werewolf. There were at least 4 in a pack, and they sounded big. The howls kept going. The poor dog kept crying and yelping as it was being eaten. I was too scared to look outside, but I didn't see that close, maybe a mile away. My mom heard the howling and the dog being ripped apart alive and the poor dog crying and yelping. My dad was in a deep sleep. My neighbors heard them too, and my next-door neighbor. My next-door neighbors were young people who would drink and party and go out late and do things like that. So they were about to leave and open the door. I heard them scream and one of them say, "Go back inside." I heard another one shut the door and lock it up. I'm not sure what scared them, but they don't usually get scared easily. I heard my other neighbor from downstairs talking on the phone saying crazy things happen late at night. He kept saying the stories of you being here when you were young just isn't stories, that it's real. He said he can't sleep at night anymore. I don't live in the countryside. I live near a mall with stores nearby. There's some spaces between the trees and some space in land, and I've seen cattle in the areas of land with fences. Luckily, I've never seen any werewolves, and I've never seen coyotes in the area or any of that. I still hear howls from time to time, but I hear it miles and miles away. It's weird that I do hear them from far away, I know, but I just wanted to share this story because it's something I never expected to happen. And those bloody screams from a poor dog is something I don't want to hear again. Story number 7. I had a shared dream with my mother in which we saw the ghost of a child and her premonitions. Some say that while dreaming, we can travel without any time and space limitation. And we can happen to share a peculiar experience with someone with whom we have a strong and close connection with, meeting them while being asleep. This is what happened to my mother and I. We always had a special relationship, as we talk about pretty much everything. I can say that she probably transmitted me her gift, being able to have different perceptions related to the paranormal world. That's why we happened to meet in a dream more than once. It was very scary. The first time it happened, it was nothing scary. We were just at the beach, so I'm not going to explain more. The second time, though, we were in our living room. It looked like a normal dream at first. We were just chatting about unimportant matters, and then I said something out loud which really stuck out. We must pay attention to children's ghosts. I remember seeing then a woman's face in my dream after this sentence, right before waking up. During breakfast, I always tell her about what I dream about, and it's always something scary or weird anyways, and while I started narrating, her facial expression changed a little bit after I started. She said that she had the same dream, chatting with me in the living room, but instead of hearing my weird and creepy phrase, she saw the woman's face and the one of a child from the 1930s. He had straight hair, set with a row to one side, and he didn't look mean. He just had the typical facial features and clothing of a random child in those years. She also felt a little pressure on her right before some sort of grab on the arm, but she was still sleepy, so she brushed it off and fell back to sleep. While talking to each other about the experience, we felt as if somebody was watching us, so we no longer bring it up. Thinking about it, though, still haunts me. Ghost girl who lives in my house, and more. Since I was a child, I always had some kind of perception. I often felt like someone was watching me, as if I wasn't alone in my house. Or, just perceiving weird energies around me. I was little, so I didn't pay any attention to it. I never told it to my parents, and even if I did, it would have been odd because the house in which I lived and still live, where what I'm about to tell you happened, was new. It had no history of deaths or murders. When I was around 11, I used to sleep in the same room as my parents. Don't judge. And basically, my bed was attached to the opposite wall of theirs. So when I looked at the ceiling, I could see the corner where the walls met. One night, I randomly woke from my sleep, shifting uncomfortably and feeling a huge sense of fear. I was uneasy as it was very late, past midnight. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw the detailed silhouette of a girl, which was around my age at the time or even younger. She was basically floating in the exact corner in front of me. She wore an expensive-looking dress from the 800s, which I'm guessing they mean 1800s. And she also had a hat in the same style, while her hair was in curls. I could only see the outlines of her figure. They were white and bluish and felt as if I was about to die because of how scared I was. For the same reason I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. And only some seconds later I could run into my parents' bed. For many years, I had been reassured because I had successfully convinced myself that this was sleep paralysis. But two things made me realize that it probably wasn't. First of all, when I climbed in my parents' bed, I turned around and for some seconds to check on if it was still in the corner, and I can vividly remember that the mysterious girl was in fact still there. But the most important thing is that much later I discovered that the land on which the house was built previously belonged to a rich family from the 1800s. And they had a daughter who died very young. I'm still afraid sometimes, but I still sleep in the same room without my parents. And I often feel as if somebody's sitting on my bed as soon as I lay down. I can literally feel the mattress bending from an unknown weight. And I still feel something watching me when I'm by myself. Something in the neighborhood. When we first started this trend, we saw it as a way to try something new, to explore the boring and strange neighborhood where we live, with the hope to see an unforgettable and creepy happening. What we saw, I'm sure, could definitely be described that way. It was dark and it was around 11 p.m. We were spent after trying to find something cool with the Randonauts app. We had tried to manifest something scary, an abandoned building or an entity, but the randomly generated points would always lead us to the countryside, and even trying to reach them was impossible as they were private properties. After some hours, we decided to surrender. So we just walked around my house and we never really explored those old streets. We found a weird and chained gate that blocked the way to a huge, seemingly abandoned house. There was a couch in front of the front door on which a black cat was comfortably sitting. There was a dim light that came from a window. It made it look as if there was someone inside. Near the couch there were some objects from the 50s, like a baseball basket covered in rust. The atmosphere was spooky, and there were bats flying around, but we decided to keep walking until we found something that looked like a dead-end street. A street lamp started working at once, making 3 gates visible. The first gate was right at the end with a small road. The second one was on the left, and the third one, the most important one, was on the right. I saw another black cat behind the first gate, but I turned around, and after a little bit I looked back at the gate. As soon as I did that, I literally jumped after seeing a black sheet on the ground, which was basically being dragged, but it quickly disappeared. I asked my friends to leave, as we had previously seen a weird shadow, who could have been somebody else or a person. Maybe they were behind bushes and it was just giving me anxiety nonetheless, and we decided to stay and check behind the third gate. There was something strange. It was sitting against a wall, as if it was at rest, and it seemed like it was holding a huge stick even though no hands were visible. Now that I think about it, it may have looked like a Grim Reaper's sickle. A little far from it, there was an old chair, and a drawing resembling a face appeared right on the wall. It was smiling, and it had eyes, a nose, and a curved drawn line, which represented a smiling mouth. There was some sort of noose close to it on the same wall, and the house which was behind it had a 5-pointed star on the balcony. After I saw that, I really felt as if I was in the wrong place, so I started panicking and convinced everybody else to leave. We went back home safe, but still with many questions regarding what we saw. These questions had let us basically go down this creepy street some days later. We thought about going there in the daylight, but somehow we ended up there even later than 11 p.m. We met a different scene. A huge white van was resting in the exact same place where we had seen the hooded man, and the drawing on the wall wasn't there anymore. I still can't explain what we saw and probably never will, but it's a mystery that'll probably haunt me forever, and my friends. Story number 10. Angel in the Sky. After a long car trip at night, I and 2 other friends decided to spend the night in my grandmother and grandfather's house. It was around 2 a.m. and we couldn't drive anymore. Since neither my grandmother nor grandfather was home, we thought it would be perfect, and because it was halfway to our destination. For some reason, we all felt unusually happy during the whole evening. Everything felt easy and good. And at that time in my life, it was unusual for me to feel good because I was really having a hard time. I had a very destructive life, and was kind of in the criminal area. But now to the event. It was a crystal clear Swedish winter night with a beautiful night sky, so we decided to sit on their large terrace for a while and take a look over the big lake. A while into the conversation, our eyes were drawn to the sky, because as the sky began to change color to a brighter blue hue, the sky became brighter and brighter in a very beautiful shade. Finally, an outline of a church window came up in the sky with an extremely beautiful blue harmonious color, the most beautiful color I've ever seen in my entire life. Now to the big one. At the point in the sky where the contour of the church window was located, There was a large contour of an angel that flew past the church window itself. The figure in the window seemed to be wearing some kind of dress, and it was huge. Me and my two friends froze, and our body hair stood straight up. After we observed the phenomenon, we felt extreme love, happiness, euphoria, and harmony. None of us really understood what was happening, but we felt extremely happy until we buzzed a few hours later at 3:30 a.m. It was the sickest thing I've ever been through in my 22 long years of life. I hope somebody else gets to experience what I did. I've become 100% more religious after that. And today I'm free from the destructive pattern of my life. And I feel that this was the beginning of a brighter time for me. Today, I'm a person who wants to help others. Story number 11. Unexplainable things that happened in a newly built house. First, I'd like to establish some context. I'm not exactly a believer in the paranormal, though I try to keep an open mind. Really, I kind of want to experience something that makes me believe. But until that happens, I remain agnostic on the subject. That isn't to say that I haven't had some experiences that fall into the realm of the unknown, though. The house that I grew up in was built 2 years before I was born, which makes it in the late 80s. My parents were the first occupants. The plot it was built on was just some northern New England farmland bordering on some woods. No Native American burial grounds or anything as far as I know. The unexplainable experiences I had could both be explained as auditory hallucinations. If they were, then good Lord, did they sound real. I'm going to start with the more benign and less freaky of the two events. It was probably about maybe making me somewhere around 12 years old. And I was staying up on a weekend playing video games and watching Newgrounds cartoons on my dad's computer. It was probably around 10 p.m. I believe specifically I was playing StarCraft. And while I went about cheesing my opponents with Nidus Canals and Hydralisks, I was singing a song in my head. Kind of embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure it was Limp Bizkit. Anyway, I'm just reciting the song in my head when suddenly I hear a young female voice very clearly say, "I know what you're singing." Like I could hear the song in my head, but my ears actually heard this young woman's voice. It's not the voice of my mother or sister. Totally unfamiliar. I immediately look around and start freaking the fuck out. My parents were asleep, my sister's off at college, and I look around the house, even went outside to see if there was any sign of somebody being there, and nothing. Nope. I heard this voice clear as day, and I never found the source. The second instance was much more menacing, seemingly. I can't remember the exact details, but the circumstances were similar. I believe this was a few years later. I was probably about 14 or 15. I believe my parents were away for one reason or another, and my sister's still off at college, so I'm home alone this time. Another late night of gaming, and I finally decided to go to sleep. I fall asleep but wake up not too long after to go pee. When I go back into my room, I start hearing the sounds of heavy breathing. I started out having it being somewhat faint, but I hold my breath to try to hear it better and make sure that it isn't just me breathing weirdly without realizing. It gradually, over about 20 seconds, gets louder and louder. I'm looking around the room trying to figure out where it's coming from, and while it's getting so loud, it really sounds like somebody's right behind me. They're breathing deep and with rage. It felt fucking terrifying, and it was loud. This went on probably a minute or two before it eventually stopped. It scared the absolute shit out of me, and felt very clearly malevolent, whatever it was. Story number 12. Something evil burned down my uncle's house. Okay, so I was around 15 at the time. I was super into demons and the occult as a teen. My siblings and I were staying at my Nana's house. I was in the middle of summer, so I was going to spend the day in the creek. That night we went to my uncle's house. He lived in an old farmhouse on a property. She had to work the next day, so we went there to be nosy kids. He was dating some woman who had 2 kids that were around the same age as my brother and his sister, so at some point in the night we went to Walmart to buy a shitload of snacks and hit the $1 DVD bin for some classic horror movies. We're all high on sugar and about 90 bagel bites. Telling ghost stories or horror movies sucked. At some point, I bring up the fact that I know how to make Ouija boards and use them to talk with spirits. My uncle, this 6'4", 250-pound bastard of a man, eggs us on. So I make the Ouija board out of bagel bite box and magic markers. We use a shot glass from maybe Mississippi or Alabama, something like that's on it, and I remember the Dixie flag on the side of it. Mistakes 1 and 2. We didn't have a candle, so we used a disco ball. You know, the ones that have a lot of colored dots and they spin around. Not the mirrored kind. Us girls just start circling the board with the glass, inviting something to join us. A few moments pass, long enough for us to just all get around this board. Suddenly the glass jerks to say hello, and our fingers all slip off. Everyone laughs, and we told just, quit messing around. My uncle just kind of laughs and asks for a name. The glass spells out Ross. Full disclosure of all the events are true, but I don't remember his real name. I'm just guessing for the sake of storytelling, but I remember it was short, only 4 or 5 letters, and it was a classic man's name. My uncle fussed at us, telling us to quit messing around, that Ross was the name of the guy who built the farm. Ross would also happen to be a distant relative. We didn't know that, but, sure, we could have heard the name in passing maybe, but put our fingers back on the glass. The girl's too scared to keep going, but my sister and I do. We put our hands back on the glass and circle the board. Our hands get cold to the point that my joints are starting to hurt. I also feel dread, and the temperature in the room is dropping despite using a small window AC in the middle of the Kentucky summer. I ask if it's good or evil, and it jerks to E before our fingers are forced off. Everyone is uneasy at this point. My uncle's girlfriend kind of starts freaking out and tells us all to stop. I tell her that we have to say goodbye. She ends up getting mad and going to bed. So like any teens would do, we kept going. My sister and I pick up the shot glass, making circles in opposite directions. We tell Ross that we're done talking to him and thank him for his time. We all then do a small ritual claiming no evil and try to summon a new spirit. This time asking for a good spirit. And after circling some time, we eventually get another hello. When we ask this spirit what its name is, it spells out Ross. We get a little angry and tell Ross to leave. I know my voice was shaking when I told him that we were scared and he was unwelcome. The disco ball starts spinning like someone has their hand on top, only the base is spinning slowly, winding the cord until it unplugged itself. We all just kind of watched, dumbfounded. My uncle immediately stood up, says it's time to go outside for a smoke break. There's a door in the living room that starts shaking like someone's pounding on it. The door is only accessible from the living room. A trailer was placed next to the house to give it extra rooms and bathrooms, so the door is blocked off to the side when whatever's trying to come through. We scramble out, my uncle first and me last. On my way out, something grabbed my ponytail. My sister said something pulled it straight up. While outside, we tried to burn the board. This was just cardboard that frozen food came in and a Sharpie marker. My uncle is actively trying, but it won't light or stay lit. He decides to just douse it in gas, toss it in the burn barrel. It takes an uncomfortable amount of time to burn. I remember watching it after the initial whoosh from the gas. Goodbye was the last corner to burn. My Nana had a couple of dog farms. My Nana had a couple of farm dogs. They were friendly enough to us, but were aggressive, kind of hated strangers. These dogs were losing their minds barking at the house. After that, we're all a bit scared. Us kids go to my Nana's house. Us girls sleep in the bed, and the boys slept on an air mattress on the floor. The girls ended up wetting the bed, and at breakfast we all talked about having nightmares. They were different, but we all agreed our dreams had fire. Mine was being in a just burning bed, and I couldn't escape it. My Nana freaked out when she heard what we did. She called a priest and had holy water and oils within an hour. She took us to the creek and did a mock baptism with the oils and water while chewing us out. Then she took crosses to my uncle's house, putting them on both doors of his bedroom. We went back to my Nana's a lot. We'd see my uncle every time too, since he lived 300 feet from Nana. His house always felt cold and unwelcoming. Maybe 4 to 6 months pass. My Nana's getting ready to feed all our animals and notices my uncle's house is on fire. Luckily, he survived. His bedroom was the last to catch. The fire department took a long time to get there, and the house was lost. I think they said it was a cigarette that he dropped that started it all in the living room. I lived in a Civil War-era house as a kid. These are the encounters that I can't forget. My mom bought a house when I was in 2nd grade. It was built in 1856 or 1857. I'm not entirely sure. The guy who built it was a prominent doctor. He had a few kids, and I don't really know a whole lot about him, but over the years, a couple of people died there. Mostly him and his kids. But we got the house because the woman living there, her sister died and she wanted to move into a nursing home. The house wasn't used to treat patients as far as I know. There was a hospital built maybe 80 yards from us where I'm fairly sure he did most of his work. I know that a place is very haunted, and it's that one. But I don't think it's haunted by anything malicious as far as I know. Anyways, I feel like that's enough background about the house. We lived there in the early 2000s. I was 6 or 7, and we moved out when I was 13. We didn't live there for a very long time, though. The house did seem like bad luck. So we had a dog named Snowball. He's an American Eskimo dog, 20 pounds, fluffy and white as snow. He would just stare in dark corners a whole lot. As would my cat. I'd hear my mom call for me a lot, but when I went to go look for her, she wasn't home from work yet and hadn't called for me. A few times we would be in the kitchen or the living room and we would hear something digging through my shoeboxes full of Polly Pockets. My bedroom was directly above the living room and the floor was thin. We would go upstairs to look for the cat or dog, and they were usually in the living room with us. The cat liked to stay underneath the couch. But when we would investigate, all my dolls and accessories would be thrown about my room and the door was closed. Snowball liked to chew on the dolls as he had a gum disease, and I guess it felt good. But he really didn't like being alone, and his favorite spot was the green couch where he could look out and watch the street. He was also old and only went upstairs when it was cold, and we would all sleep in one room. He liked the heater, as did my cat, but often very close to us, so she liked the spot on the red couch where she could watch TV. None of the pets liked going upstairs, unless we were there too. I spent a lot of my time outside, but I also liked to sit in the office, and I would prefer to play Neopets, RuneScape, and watch videos on various sites. I'd feel like someone was watching me all the time. I'd turn around and I was alone. Sometimes when I was outside, I would know my mom's still at work, but in her bedroom window, I'd see a man looking down at me. I don't remember being afraid of him, just kind of used to seeing him. Mom always said it was just Dr. Green. I'd wave to him and he would just vanish. One night I woke up to somebody sitting on my bed, and it was freezing as they were pulling my blanket down. I woke up mad, then panicked because pulling at my blanket was the man in the window. Then I could smell it. Something was burning. I woke my mom up and found that the microwave was shorting out and had burnt through the cable. It was on the verge of catching fire. After that, I made my grandmom take his whole grave, or take me to his grave, and I guess the only thing I could do was leave flowers for him all the time. Dr. Green was a nice ghost. He would just appear, and he woke me that one time, though. Then there was Luke. Luke was malicious. He terrorized the pets. That's why they wouldn't really go upstairs. He always appeared in dark corners, and I could never bring myself to walk past him. It felt like if I did, something bad would happen. It was more active, too. Cabinets would fly open, things would fall off the shelves, and he would throw things at us. In the dead of night, you could hear heavy boots climb the stairs. Sometimes the TV would randomly flip channels. You would hear groans, and he actually attacked us. I regularly had nightmares, and I would wake up with strange bruises, cuts, and scratch marks. This was also happening to my mom. We know his name was Luke because my mom used to record QVC in the sewing channel on the VCR. I think it was QVC, and they were doing some craft thing, but they asked the caller what their name was, and very clearly in a masculine voice, somebody says, Luke. Then the woman called, who was live on the show, and goes on to say her name and go on about the product. We were only guessing that the friendly ghost was Dr. Green, as the man always appeared in similar clothing to the photos that we had of him. Very nice suits and a hat. Luke was dressed in ratty-looking clothing, and he wore huge boots with spurs. I can still hear his boots clanging up these squeaky steps. Lastly, there was a ghost dog. I love animals, but I hated this dog. It was huge, black, and made me feel sick to my stomach. It also appeared everywhere. Outside the carport, downstairs, upstairs, and especially the cellar. I could hear its toenails clack on the hard wood, and I would hide underneath my blankets. The hair on my arms and neck would raise, and I could hear it sniffing me. It makes my skin crawl to think about that dog. If you looked at it, it would growl and vanish, but I only saw it maybe twice. I heard it all the time, though. I'd also have nightmares about this huge black dog following me around. It was a reoccurring dream that scared me so much as a kid. I'd be in the yard, and there was a creek that ran through the yard. It went under the road, and there were these huge steel cylinders that let the water pass. I could crouch and walk through them, but I'd see this dog there, and it was guarding what looked like a kid's body. It would immediately wake me up. Never thought to look up and see if a kid had died there. I was a kid and it scared me to even think about it, but I still see that dream vividly, and I own a big black lab Great Dane mix, and sometimes it gives me flashbacks to that dog. I could go on and on about odd things that happened, and more happened to my mom. She has weird pictures, videos, and even called a priest to cleanse the house. But I don't think it ever helped. It may have, but the people who live there now fixed up the house a lot. I've been tempted to knock on the door and ask them, but I feel like that would be kind of weird, so I drive past the house every time that I go to visit my grandparents, at least. Also, stepping back on the property makes me just feel uneasy. So when we were moving out, I was just packing my things and something knocked over my corkboard. I was frustrated because it broke, but I told whatever it was to leave me alone, that I was leaving. Then I heard something behind me clearly say, "If you come back, I'll kill you." I don't want to take my chances with the paranormal. With a threat like that, I don't want to mess with it, especially as this was the voice of something very different from Luke's. It hissed, made me feel sick, and made the room very cold as well. The Friendly Ghost. So I moved into my current house about a year ago after having a fallout with my previous roommates. It's a tiny house built probably around 1920, and you can tell. It's had a little renovation since then, though. A lot of work needs, but it's real cozy. My fiancé and I have been here for close to a year now, and since moving in, we've experienced paranormal activity that resembles something of a cat, which is kind of hilarious to us. We're not alone in this. We've actually had more than a few people confirm to us that they've either seen said cat or have felt the presence of said cat. Going back to the first experiences that we had, it would just be like seeing a little black ball dart around the corner or even up the stairs. One day, my fiancé and I are sitting on the couch watching TV. From my living room, the dining room table is to the right if you're sitting on the couch and you can see clearly into it. So we're chilling after a long day of deep cleaning the house, and there's a paper towel roll just sitting in the middle of the table, standing straight up. As we're watching TV, the roll just flies off the table. Well, not fly, just kind of like fell, but it's weird because it was directly in the middle of the table and nowhere even close to the edge. So it was more like batted off. I get up, pick it up, put it back to where it was, and go back to what I was doing. I don't think anything of it, so some 10 minutes later it happens again. So now I'm wondering what's happened. I'm thinking, was it wind? So I start crossing off things that it could have been. It's the dead of summer. So was the window AC unit on? Nope. Ceiling fan? Nope. Nothing. There was no reason for it to just be falling onto the floor like that. But regardless, I shrugged it off as maybe it just being some weird gravity phenomenon, or maybe the simulation of life glitching, But later that week, we have a friend over. He'd never really been over, and we never really told him about the experiences that my fiancé and I were having. Soon as he walks in the door, he kind of does this weird sidestep maneuver. So I ask, "What was that?" He goes, "I thought I was going to step on an animal for some reason." And of course, there was nothing there. A couple hours later, my fiancé and I and our friends are eating dinner at the table, and an empty grocery bag in the kitchen falls from the bag of bags. Everybody else does it, right? Do y'all save bags? But I just winds up sitting there for a minute, deflated. Then it just opens up like something crawled into it, and the top starts batting around unnaturally, like it's being played with. We all hear this and watch it happen for a few seconds. Then the bag returns to its deflated state, and we're all like, what was that about? But again, it doesn't look like the wind. Wind wouldn't have made a bag move around the kitchen. So we now tell him about our previous experiences, and we all came to the conclusion that it's most likely a cat. So we settle on the most cliche name ever. We name it Catspur. I spend a few minutes making fun of the name and ridiculing its antics. And later that night, around 4 a.m.-ish, I wake up to the sound of something move on my bedside table. I brush it off as I sleep and get back to the delirium as I go back to sleep. Then I just feel the gentlest whack on my head, like a paw swatting at me. Then I hear something jump up on the table and skitter down the stairs. This time I jump up, turn on the light, and investigate. Nothing. Not a single animal in the house. I know for sure it wasn't a mouse, so I exclaim, "All right, you win. You can stay." Another time we had a few friends over, and someone that we didn't know just showed up with another friend and asks my fiancé, "Hey, can I meet your cat?" And of course we tell her the whole shebang, and she goes, "Thought you guys had a cat. Saw it run up the stairs." And we're just like, "Yeah, it does that." So now we have a ghost cat. And whenever I give it a lot of shit for being a shithead, one of our decorative fake cactuses will just fall from one of the shelves for no reason, but on good days, we'll feel a gentle brush up against our legs when we're sitting on the couch, and an overall sense of comfort from the house. We've never felt anything malicious or had any other bad experiences living here. Just the cat. And according to our landlady, the previous tenant had a lot of pets. It's entirely possible one of them passed, and their souls just stuck around. I'm not complaining, but the next time it swats my head in my sleep, I'm getting the ghost cat spray bottle. A knock on the door. This experience happened to me around a year ago. I had just moved into a new apartment with a few roommates. We'd been there about a month or two at the most at this point. I had just come home from an excruciatingly taxing day at work. I walked through the door to the apartment and realized that nobody was home. Awesome, I thought. Dropped all my stuff by the door, pet the cat, grabbed a towel, got into the shower. It was one of those days where you just kind of sit down in the shower and just let the water pelt you, just to let the muscles relax a bit. And I was in the shower for no more than 5 minutes before I hear a loud bang on the bathroom door, followed by the jiggling of a doorknob. Naturally, I'm shocked. The bang was loud enough to sound like a gunshot went off. It was too loud to be the pipes. It sounded like somebody trying to kick down the door. I'm thinking, did somebody break in? Then I made an executive decision. I'm going down, disorienting them. So I jump out of the shower and rip open the door while unclothed. And then there's nobody. Not a single person was there. Grab my towel and I start checking rooms, windows, and doors. Still, nobody home. All the doors locked, all windows still intact. Hell, even the cat was still asleep. I reluctantly go back to the bathroom to finish my shower, and I don't think anything of it. And later that night, I'm just chilling in my room, still nobody home. I left my door open for the cat just in case it wanted to come hang out in my room. My roommate's room was almost directly outside of mine to the right, and I hear the cat in the hallway, just hissing and angrily meowing at their room. Their door was closed, so I'm thinking, what the hell could she possibly be meowing at? I walk up to Esper and I say, "What's wrong, sweetie?" There's nobody in there. As soon as I say those words, something falls and clatters onto the bedroom floor, and the cat bolts away. Just in case somebody had gotten home without my knowledge, I knock on the bedroom door. Get no answer. I peek into their room and there's a bunch of CDs on the floor, seemingly ripped off of their disc rack. I pick them up, put them back, and leave the room. I leave the door open this time, just to make sure I'm not being crazy if it happens again. My fiancée stopped by an hour later after she'd just gotten off of work. We were chilling in the living room just watching TV and talking. By the way the apartment was set up, if you were sitting on the couch to your left, you can see all the way down the hallway and into my roommate's room if they had their door open, which it was for now. My fiancée got a sudden chill, and to my left, I can see just out of the corner of my eye an all-black silhouette of a man, just standing in their doorway. I took a look at him, and he walks away to the right, where their closet is. I ran to their bedroom and slammed their door shut. I look at my fiancée and say, "Did you see that too?" She nods her head with a scared look on her face. I tell her that we're just gonna leave for a while, so we grab our stuff and head out. I call my roommates later and ask them if they've experienced anything weird since we moved in. They told me that sometimes while I'm at work, they hear people talking in my room, even though nobody's there. Needless to say, I'm happy I don't live there anymore. The Black Isles, a Scottish paranormal encounter. My mom and 2 other brothers would visit my auntie and 3 cousins around Christmas. The whole family would get together too. Uncles, aunties, you name it. Anyway, they lived up near Inverness in Scotland. It's a place called the Black Isle. It's actually in a place called Cromarty, but Inverness is more well known, so I'll say that one. The Black Isle was said to be used back in the day as a place where witches would meet up on Halloween and perform satanic rituals, animal sacrifices, that sort of stuff. Whether or not that's true is another story. On to this one. We all rented out a holiday home just down the road from my cousin's house. It had multiple bedrooms in it, so Perfect for a lot of guests. Me, one of my older brothers, and his friend from Africa were all staying in one room. They were fast asleep. I, however, was not. I woke suddenly. I didn't know why. I scanned the room with my bleary eyes, and it was just dark. I couldn't hear anything but the snores from my brother and his friend. The door to the room slowly opened with a creak. Swear to God, I froze with fear. I didn't see anything enter through it. But as I tried to scan my eyes around the room, I started to see shadow-like figures pulsating and hovering around the two adjacent beds, hovering and pulsating over my brother and his friend. There must have been at least 3 of these figures. The third one stood over my bed, although this apparition didn't have any human-like features except for maybe the shape of something human. I could feel like it was just staring right at me. I decided the only course of action was to turn over and face the wall and go to sleep. The morning after I told my experience to a few of my family members, they joked that it might be witches that performed those rituals in the past, and generally didn't believe me except one person, my brother's girlfriend. She told me she experienced something as well. She was only sleeping next door, and she told me that she felt somebody sit down at the end of her bed in the night, and said that she could feel the weight of something on her legs, but she couldn't see anything. Very frightened by this, I decided to read the guest book to see if anybody else had reported anything weird and unusual. Nothing of the sort was there, though, and I'll never forget what I saw, though, and if you're ever up near that Black Isle or stay in the same holiday home I did, just be aware of any strange figures entering your room at night. Many weird occurrences in fairly new house. I want to preface this by saying the house itself is only 15 years old. I'm not very versed on hauntings, so I don't really know if it could be the area beforehand that haunted it or a spirit being attaching itself to this place. But I digress. I'll list everything that I can remember. Probably the most significant was my father hearing the voice of his deceased friend shout up to him from downstairs. He said he heard him clear as day, and he walked down expecting to see him. That's how clear it was. And this happened not long after he moved in 15 years ago. He's also heard people generally speaking in the other room. He and my sister have all heard footsteps upstairs that sound like kid ones. Light running around, you know? My siblings sometimes visit, so you'd think it was them if they were here, but I live alone most of the time. I felt someone tap my shoulder while I was eating, turned around to expect someone, and then realized I'm still alone in the house. I heard what sounded like a whispered scream in my ear once, but I was half asleep in the morning. Thought this could have just been a high-pitched wind, but even last night I heard what sounded like a woman's voice in my ear before I sort of stay asleep, and something that I'm hearing is pretty unintelligible, though. My younger sibling says that she gets bad vibes from the house and doesn't like sleeping alone when she's here. I've heard things move in the kitchen. Recently, my father walked through the front door expecting mail. Nothing. He said he heard someone slip a package through the letterbox and hit it, the sound of it hitting the ground. I was woken up by the loud bang downstairs one morning. I went downstairs with a massive night watchman torch expecting someone to be there, but there was nothing. This one could perhaps be down to a window being opened upstairs, but still no idea how it could have caused the bang. Even this morning, I was woken by the sound of a doorbell, but it was too early for the postman. Shrugged it off, went back to sleep. That's the end of today's stories for tonight. Sorry about the thunderstorm outside causing some issues here and there, but my chickens are quiet and no geckos yelling at me. So as always, see you guys later.